guys, and welcome back to a new episode of Couch Critics.
Hi guys, we're Couch Critics, and today we're reviewing Black Swan.
Yes, we're reviewing a classic. It's a movie by Darren Aronovsky, something like that. And it starts Natalie Portman,
Yes.
Vincent Cassel, Mila Kunis,
Yep.
and I think it was before they became famous. It was one of the movies that brought them fame in the first place.
Yeah.
And it's about this ballerina who wants to be the swan queen to play in that music. It's a musical, right?
It's a ballet.
It's a ballet, yeah. And so her teacher, he chooses her to be the queen, and the only problem is that she's good at being the white swan, but she has troubles becoming the black swan, and there are a lot of things that we're gonna get into that justify why was it so hard for her to become the black swan, to just flip into the black swan. And yeah,
I think in terms of thrillers, this movie is the OG thriller. We've reviewed a lot of thrillers, and I think this for me, it is the movie that introduced me to psychological thrillers, and I think that's the beauty of it, and this is why it is such a classic. And fun fact, Natalia Portman, I always call her Natalia, but it's Natalie. Natalie Portman studied psychology in Harvard. That was her major.
Okay.
So it's just funny to see. I always wonder if she used her knowledge in psychology to actually embody this character even better.
Or her character in the last movie that she made, the one that we reviewed.
Yeah, May December.
With Julianne Moore,
Also, yeah, that was also a thriller. Now that I'm thinking about it, she did a lot of thrillers. She also did V for Vendetta, which is also an incredible movie. So yeah, Natalie Portman.
She always picks up the best roles, and she portrays them so beautifully, and she could play so many wide ranges of emotions so perfectly. So yeah, she's definitely one of my favorite actresses out there.
Me
and
too.
It's always interesting to see the choices that she makes for her characters.
Yeah.
But yeah, Black Swan. How can we start this? Is like can we start by talking about ballet in general? Like, what's your take on it? Because I feel like I have not a long, but I do have a rant to say about the ballet industry.
Yeah, I have a lot to say about ballet. My growing up, my older sister did ballet.
Okay.
Since I was 3 years old, if not before. She did it for 5 years. She was very good, and because she's my older sister, I always looked up to her, and I always wanted to do ballet. So as soon as I turned 6, I took a year of ballet classes.
Really?
And I was miserable for a 6-year-old. I would come back from the class every day and tell my mom I want to quit because my ballet teacher would yell at me all the time. And again, I was 6 years old. And my mom told me, Ruby, you signed up for it for the whole year. You're finishing it. Then next year, maybe you could not do it. But like you started something, you have to finish it. I'm so happy that my mom made me continue it, and I have a lot of admiration for ballet. I just don't think it was for me, but I also have a lot of reservations when it comes to it because I think it could be one of those very toxic careers. I know about a lot of ballet dancers who ended up spiraling because it is a very elitist, perfectionist dance activity, and you have to be a certain weight, you have to be a certain height, you have to have a certain posture, certain hairstyles. It's very strict, and I think that's great because it teaches people discipline, but it can also be very negative and draining for people if they don't know how to find the balance between wanting to be a great ballet dancer and wanting to have a normal life, because even the diet for ballet dancer is very strict for ballet dancers. And in general, just to sum it all up, when I think of ballet, I think of perfection. I think that's the word that comes with it. You cannot do something wrong in ballet, like when you're doing your pirouette and stuff, like you cannot trip, you cannot make a mistake, and it's a very tricky career. I would not want to have a career in ballet, but I have so much admiration for the people who actually make it.
I have a question for you. I know when you used to go to your ballet classes, you were younger, you were very young, but do you remember if you did feel that pressure to be perfect back at that young age in those classes? Like, how did you feel before, during, and after the classes? And now as an adult, like, would you maybe sign up your kids to ballet
I
in the
think
future?
if they show interest in it, I would definitely like encourage them to
Hmm.
go for it. I think kids should try everything. Even like for me, I would maybe go back. I went back a couple of years ago, took some ballet classes. I wasn't really consistent with them. I just did it for the fun,
Yeah,
and I really liked it. I loved the way it made me feel. It's definitely not something I was planning to pursue in like
as a
professionally or
career.
anything. I just did it as a hobby, and I found a lot of pleasure doing that. But yes, back in the day, I think it was the perfectionist like aspect to
Hmm.
it. Like my ballet teacher, she was very old school and she was
Yeah,
very old.
yeah,
And she kept like yelling at me because my feet were not a certain like way.
yeah.
And it's just the way, like it's just I don't know, it's not something I knew how to fix at the
Hmm.
time. So I think that's the tough part about it. But I'm pretty sure if I had a different teacher, like a younger teacher, it would have been a different experience. But because it was such an old school, like old ballet teacher, it just was so it was a very like special experience,
Yeah,
but and it really marked me, and I completely forgot about it until you just
yeah.
like asked me about it. But yeah, I did feel the pressure of it being perfect,
Mhm.
but I still had fun doing it, and I sometimes look back at the pictures of us like in the final
Yeah,
play, and
it
it
was a
was good
fun time.
memories, you know.
Good.
Yeah. What
Um,
about you? What's your take on ballet?
okay. I don't know how to phrase it in a nice way, but I do not understand how why people would want to do ballet. Like I feel like it's such a from I read a lot of books about
Hmm.
ballet
Yeah.
dancer biographies because I had this phase where I was really obsessed with it and I watched a lot of movies and shows, and like if I can think of one on top of my head for you guys to check it out, Tiny Little Things. It's on Netflix and it's a
Okay.
show with real ballerinas
Okay.
and it's a Netflix show. Black Swan too.
Yeah.
And from everything that the information that I gathered, and it's why did I even go into this spiral? It's because I've always wanted to be a ballerina. I've always wanted to take classes, but my parents wouldn't want to sign me up. So the only way for me, the closest that I could get into ballet classes was through research and like reading books and watching movies. And from everything that I've seen, it's just so toxic. Like it's just the most draining, ugly industry out there in the sports industry. And okay, like the only sports that I can compare it to is I have a background in martial arts. I played it for like over a decade, and I find it very funny how in like sport combats everything is about respecting each other,
Hmm.
respecting your body. If you don't eat well, if you don't sleep well, you're gonna break yourself. Like
Yeah.
literally you cannot get through your class. If you don't respect each other, you're gonna fall back on the floor. If you fall back, you have to stand up and keep going. It's all very positive, and it's all these values that now, like a few years, it's been a few years since I stopped playing martial arts. These values haunt me, and it's the way that I lead my life with these values.
Yeah.
Like, when I say in a combat, if you fall on the floor, you need to stand back because you need to keep going. It's something that you can apply to your life, respecting uh, people of authority, like older people. It's something that you apply in a class of martial arts because your teacher are just as harsh as ballet teacher, if
Yeah.
not harder. I During my classes, like maybe I heard one compliment in 5 years and I
Yeah.
remembered it because it was a compliment.
Yeah.
But it's all positivities. Like even when my body, I remember when I was younger, and this is like maybe personal, I struggled a lot with body image, and doing martial arts forced me to respect my bodies because I'm just like, oh my god, like I can do all of these things. I can get through a class, and it's a hard cardio class. Whereas when I watch ballet, it's these weak, like looking skinny girls who are most of the time anorexic and have these mental illness, like they're sad, depressed, anorexic, and everything. And then like it makes me think, like, why is that a symbol of like sophistication? Why, when we think of like doing something sophisticated, we think of like going to watch a ballet performance? It's watching torture unfold. Like their bones are breaking, their finger like are break. I'm talking about professional ballerinas. Again, I
Yes.
know a lot of people who do it for fun. And again, like the people who do it for fun, who truly respect their bodies, they never make it into professional ballerinas because they don't fit the standards. So to me, it's the only industry who doesn't evolve, because why is it the only industry where we don't see any body diversity? And
Yeah.
why are people okay with that? Why are we normalizing this form of suffering? And yeah, that was my angry rant, because I'm sick of like hearing bad things about martial arts, how they're aggressive and everything, and they're not. Whereas in sports like ballet,
Yeah.
they're just portrayed as beautiful sports, harmless, and every good thing
Oh, I have
when
so
it's
much to
not.
say about this because I think that in martial arts, teachers are strict with you for your own good.
Yeah.
In ballet, teachers are strict with you for the final product, which is the ballet dance,
Hmm.
like the show that's gonna like be the outcome of it. And a good show at the end doesn't necessarily mean a healthy life for the ballerinas. And I
Yeah.
think that that's the main difference. This is why martial arts, in my opinion, is a way healthier sports mentally and physically than ballet. And I totally agree with what you said about it.
Hmm.
It's funny because I have this image that stuck with my head. I remember always because my classes were after the older kids, and I would go
Yeah.
into the dressing room, and you would see like people's feet destroyed because of the ballet, the blisters, everything. And it's so sad, but people didn't mind it. Like for some reason, it's this how do we say masochistic kind of
Yeah.
dance. Like people suffer, but they enjoy suffering for it. And listen, if that's what something is into, sure, but I don't think it's the healthiest. It's the healthiest thing, and I don't think it's the healthiest career.
Yeah.
And even filming the movie, like Natalie Portman did 6 months of ballet training before starting to film the movie. She
Hmm.
lost a tremendous amount of weight. Even Mila Kunis had to smoke a lot to fit into her character. And it just, like, by the end of the movie, Natalie Portman was almost invisible because of all the weight she lost. And I don't think it's the healthiest thing. And that's also method acting taken to the extreme. It's not just about ballet, it's also
Yeah.
about method acting. But would it she have won an Oscar for that movie if she didn't go that far? That's another question. Because she did deliver a great performance because her suffering was so real. And
Hmm.
I don't know.
No, I totally agree with you. To just add to your first point, like when you say like you feel like martial arts are much healthier than ballet, maybe you're gonna have people who are gonna be like, oh, okay, like in martial art, people hurt themselves too. They break bones and everything, and that's true. I've already broken a finger. I had so many concussions and everything, but each time it wasn't because someone hit me. Yes, they hit me because I am not gonna hit myself, but it was because it was my fault. I did not play by the rules. It was either because I didn't eat enough, I was too tired, I overdid something, and I wasn't playing by the rules that are very clear. So yeah, I'm just like anticipating the arguments that are gonna
Yes.
come. Also, I do feel like to win an Oscar, especially back at the time, I feel like it was harder to win
Yeah.
Oscars back at the
And
time.
it was more valuable, in my opinion. No offense to
Exactly.
the Oscars, we love them, but
Yeah.
it was a different thing back then.
I feel like like back at the time you do need to be an excellent actor in order to win an Oscar. And Natalie, she always does it. Like she always overdo it, and it's like her work is always brilliant, genius, and excellent. And so, Black Swan is no exception to that. And she was also surrounded by excellence. Like Vincent Cassel, he's one of my favorite French actors, and I love how serious he is in that movie and how he's completely transformed from what he usually like is in real life, like from what I see in his interviews and everything. And I don't know if you've seen this, but he did give, after filming Black Swan, one of the most impactful interviews that I watched about acting. He like people I remember there was this interviewer who asked him if he agreed about the I think it was method acting, about how actors would hurt themselves in order to be true. And he said that he didn't agree with that no performer should hurt themselves in order to be true. Acting or any form of art should be a form of art. It shouldn't be a way. of suffering.
I agree. I think it's a bit selfish when actors want to hurt themselves to
Hmm.
make something because doing a sacrifice to get something, it just for some reason makes it more meaningful,
Yeah,
gives you more pride in it, and it makes you just like feel superior, I think, even that you've gone through all of this to get this
yeah.
perfect result. But I don't know. I think we need to not normalize that. But that's my personal opinion. I think we're lucky to live in a place where
Hmm.
balance is very valued and just like mental health,
Yeah.
respect for oneself. That's not the case everywhere. So maybe this is why we think this way.
And I
But
think that
yeah,
maybe it could even be like something more personal, like some uh, actors just in order to feel like they could validate themselves in their performance to themselves, not to anyone else. They
yeah,
need to go a step further into, they need to like access this part of themselves that is dangerous. And
hmm.
maybe like Austin, like Natalie, and like Heath Ledger, and you know,
And I think it's a personal journey as well. Like
mhm.
maybe people do it to see how far they can go,
Yeah.
not just for the movie, but for their own personal stake. So if as long as you're convinced with what you're doing, it's fine. I mean, the only person you're hurting is yourself. So
Mm.
it's your responsibility. But I think it becomes dangerous where other people gets inspired by that and
Yeah.
becomes like start wanting to do that to
Mm.
themselves because these great actors have done it before. This
When it's
is, yeah,
normalized. Yeah, I
yeah.
totally agree. I want to talk about what makes you think, like, what's your theory about why Nina couldn't access the Black Swan side of herself? Like, why was it so hard for her to portray the Black Swan, in your opinion?
Oof, that's a very good question. I think that Nina was the kind of kid who grew up in a very conventional household. She also had her mother who was always behind her. Like her mother was very
Hmm.
overprotective of her. So I feel like the fact that she had a parent who's always controlling her, it didn't allow her to discover like her darker side. And I feel that that was not good. That was not good for her because she was oppressed for so long by her mother that when she decided that she didn't want that anymore. As soon as like her teacher told her that she had to explore her darker side to become the Black Swan, she went the complete different way. Whereas for Mila Kunis's character, even though she was the perfect Black Swan and the Black Swan is not always portrayed as this good character, she still like had more control over her dark side
Mm.
than Nina because since Nina didn't slowly develop her dark side over time, she didn't know how to control it. So I think that was why she couldn't go into her Dark Swan character. I think she also was because she was a perfectionist, she always wanted to do things right. And I think like everybody with our education system,
Yeah,
we could fall victim of that as well because our education system is so strict and we're so told what to do that as soon as we get out of this whole like system, it sometimes could be hard to make your own decisions because we're
yeah,
always told what to do. There's always like a certain path to follow that it becomes a bit harder to become more innovative and more free and more just like creative in life
totally.
in general. So yeah, what about you? What made her
I
stuck in her
totally
Black
agree
Swan?
with you when you say it's mostly her home situation and the events that were happening to her at home. I feel like Nina grew up in a very abusive
Yeah,
household. Her mom, I mean, there are scenes where we could see her bedroom. I don't know how old she is, but she seems like an adult or maybe like a teenager in her late teenage years, and she still had like all these kid-like stuff in her room. C'est quoi des peluches?
teddy bears.
Teddy bears in her room, and it just shows the amount of control that her mom had on her. And I don't think that the movie explains why her mom tried to keep her as a kid, why she didn't want her daughter to grow up. But I do feel like Nina deep down knew that if she stood up, in order to be the Black Swan, she needed to stand up to her mom. And I don't feel like she was she felt brave enough to do that. And so that like all leads me to think, because again, like a movie like Black Swan reminds me of other movies that treat the same themes, like Whiplash and I, Tonya, and even Elvis, and they all like have the protagonists all have similar uh,
Home situation.
characteristic,
Yeah.
and I feel like they excel at what they're doing because their lives are so out of control that they use excellence to run away from what makes them feel in pain. And it makes me think of like, I don't know, like the way I see excellence is this fire. And someone told me this comparison a few weeks ago. They were like, like brilliant people, excellent people, they have a fire burning in them, and they could either like let it out into the world and they will shine and they will go on to make great things, or if they try to tame it, it will burn them. And I feel like those characters, they let it shine during so many moments, and they excel at sports, at music, and acting, and singing. But at a certain time, if they don't treat the roots of the problem that makes them excel in other things, this fire is gonna burn them, and it always does. It always burns them.
Yeah.
And yeah. Versus, I'm gonna add one more thing. Versus someone who seems like he grew up in a very healthy household. We just reviewed Rudy's movie, and he's excellent, and he shows all signs of excellence. But he doesn't seem like he's like the fire will burn him back.
Yeah.
So
And it's funny because he also in the movie tried to show like his mother's controlling side,
yeah,
but I feel like because he took it in a more comic way, it wasn't as hurtful for him. And I feel like even him, he assimilated it in a comic,
mhm,
comedic way. And I feel like the key element of this is just a good communication. When you have a parent who wants to be very involved in your life, you can either be very rebellious against that and
mhm,
block them off, and this is just going to make them want to control it more, or you can just communicate it and like try to see their side of it, and this could lead to better result. I don't know. I'm just like thinking about this right now because you mentioned Rudy, and I was like, wait a minute, that's
yeah,
actually very similar, but the outcome was so different.
yeah.
So yeah.
But again, what I'm also asking myself, because I don't know, like I don't have a right answer to this theory, but what I'm asking myself, isn't that pain what makes them different from mundane normal people
Yeah.
who don't excel? Because unless you're gifted, and again, like at the same time, I say, like to me, Rudy Mancuso, he's gifted.
Yes.
And he's also talented. Like
Yeah.
he's a mix of gift and talent. Whereas when I think of someone like Nina, I mostly think of practice
Yeah.
and excellence and a lot of practice.
Yes.
Same thing for Tonya Harding and for the guy from Whiplash, and etc. So unless you have something that you're running from and that you cannot, like you cannot let that thing catch you, are you really gonna excel? Like, because if you don't have other options, isn't the only option
To be
to
excellent.
excel and to
Yeah.
be perfect? But if you do have other options, are you gonna really make it?
Yeah.
So
That took a turn because it's crazy. I
yeah,
was thinking about it just the other day. I think it's such a privilege and a curse to have choices and options
yeah,
because when you don't have an option, you have one thing to be focused on. But when you have so many choices, as I think in my case, it's just a bit of selfishness, but you want to harness every single option.
hmm,
You want to try everything. So maybe you excel less because you're spreading your energy in all of these different
yeah,
places. So yeah, that's such a good point that I hadn't thought about. But maybe they didn't have any other option. Then, but when it comes to also talent and gifts, I think everybody either has like I think the thing that differentiate them because how you said it, Rudy had talent and is gifted, whereas Nina, it was just practice. I think the thing that they both have in common is the will of making something of their
yeah.
art. Like that's the difference between the people who make it and the people who don't. I think you just gotta want it in order to make it, be it in music, ballet, anything career related, honestly, or even like in your personal life.
Hmm.
If you want something, you're gonna go after it. If you're not sure about it, it's not gonna work out because you're not sure.
It's true.
So yeah.
But I totally agree with you, and I think that if they end up not making it, because they most of them don't make it at the end of these
Yeah.
movies, even Elvis, like his ending was sad.
But he
He
made it
made it, but
career-wise,
to
but
what's
to what extent? To
to
what
what
extent?
extent?
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think that's the thing. Like, do you want to be
Mhm.
a star or do you want to be happy or do you want both? You can want both. You just have to think about wanting both. I think he put his
Mm,
happiness aside for the sake of his career.
to me, the silver lining is that is a question actually, because to me these characters are a cautionary tale,
Yeah.
and they all ask us the same question: is how much are you willing to pay for that thing that you so desperately want?
Yeah.
Because there is a sacrifice to make, and it's not always an easy one. So
It's basically be careful what you wish for.
yeah,
That's basically it.
totally.
Because I never understood if by the end of the movie Nina died or not, because it was a very tragic ending. Like I remember the last scene, there was blood in it, and she,
Yeah.
like at the end, she was fighting with herself with the mirror, and I didn't understand the ending. I didn't know if she actually ended up hurting herself or not. But yeah.
I think that what Darren, the director, was trying to do with this movie is truly like use ballet as a form of drugs,
Yeah.
and show that it's exactly the same as taking drugs. And by the end, her hallucinations were so strong that she stabbed herself,
Yeah.
thinking,
She was defending herself or
yeah,
something.
yeah, she killed the white swan in order to be the
Yeah.
black swan, and that was a happy ending for her because she did make her dream come true. But yeah, it's an excellent movie.
It is. It
Yeah,
is. And I feel like it's a psychological thriller, and we
yeah.
did like criticize a lot of the psychological aspect of it, and I like that. I think it's
What was your favorite performance besides Natalie
Nina.
Portman?
I loved Mila Kunis. I even think I liked Mila Kunis more than Natalie, not because Natalie
Okay.
didn't do a good job, but I think that Mila Kunis's character had such a good balance. Like if I were
Mm,
to look up to someone, I would look up
like Nina.
Mila. And even though she was the Black Swan and she didn't have a lot of white swan in her, I think the fact that she was at peace with
Yeah,
being a Black Swan and she did it so naturally, that was her white swan
yeah,
thing. I don't know if it makes sense, but yeah, I loved it. I loved her so much. I genuinely love that actress so much. I love her personality in interviews. I
yeah.
love the roles she take in movies, and I think all of her performances are so light and are so like easy to accept as an audience. Whereas Natalie, she did such a great job, but it was painful to
Mhm.
watch her. Yeah. What about you? Mila or Vincent or the mother?
Definitely Vincent Cassel.
Yeah.
I loved him so much in this movie, and he was so easy to hate.
Yeah.
And I also like this scene when he's just with Natalie. She's looking at the mirror, and he's like, the only person standing in your way is you. And yeah, it was like everyone was great in this movie. We also saw Sebastian Stan. It was one of his favorite, like, first acting performance, and he was on Penn Badgley's podcast, and he said that like he was so intimidated by Natalie in that scene. So
Yes.
it's funny to see how all of these actors who were back then just small actors trying to make it, most of them were broke and not even like stable enough to do this as a permanent career, and now they're just big stars in Hollywood.
It's so inspiring to see all
Mm.
of these careers unravel and also seeing all of them end up in the Marvel franchise. Natalie
Yeah,
Portman was in Thor, Sebastian
Sebastian.
Stan in Captain America. That's so inspiring.
Shout out to all the successful, very talented casting directors
Yeah.
who are giving young new actors a chance, because I feel like we don't see that anymore in the
Not as much.
industry. It's
Yeah.
like the same faces all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, aka Timothée Chalamet
Give new
being
people a
cast
chance.
with Elle Fanning in the new Bob Dylan movie, although they were already cast together in the Woody Allen movie. And
Yeah. That
yeah,
can be difficult to imagine when you repeat the same actors, especially when they play like together, like
mm,
Timothy and Florence Pugh.
yeah,
It becomes harder to follow up with the newer movies because we're so used for the older movies, and it becomes harder to see them as new characters. But
totally.
yeah, I think that sums it up for our review.
Yeah,
Thank you so much, guys, for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe and
yeah.
give us your opinions.
And we'll see you guys next week.
Bye.
Bye.